Hello, fellow Disney Plus watcher. I'm excited to talk about Disney Plus with you today and rank episodes. But just fair warning here, it's essential for me to discuss spoilers for the entirety of Book of Boba Fett. Maybe it already spoke for itself, but spoilers. That's your warning. Before you click, skip through my video to discover my placements and then press dislike because you don't agree, wait up. I need you to understand why this ranking might be perceived as pretty controversial and might even come across as hypocritical at one point, but I'll try to explain my thinking here as carefully as possible. Book of Boba Fett is a weird show. It's a laser-focused Boba Fett show in the first 4 chapters, and then it's a total MCU Avengers Assemble kind of offering in the final 3, with the last episode arguably being very Boba Fett-centric, but still, the show broke away from itself for a long bit. On the show as a whole, I'm torn, man, and that makes it hard to rank these vastly different episodes. On the one hand, it's peak Star Wars for me in terms of the content itself. Great inspiration from westerns, samurai, mafia, all taking place in a very familiar, lived-in Star Wars world, which will be Tatooine. Also, it's about a one man's journey to the light side, if you think about it, about a man that redeems himself, kind of, about a man welcomed into a tribe, and the sometimes slightly underdeveloped and slow journey is there and kept me hooked. On the other hand, the show becomes a bait-and-switch Marvel-like crossover fest where every casual viewer that decides to watch Book of Boba Fett and never watched Mandalorian, or is doing it the other way around in the future, is done dirty. And in a way, these episodes are some of the best directed and also the most emotional for us as Star Wars fans. But the corporate textbook, how can we get the word of mouth going to get more subscribers, couldn't be more shameless in my opinion. You know what also would be shameless right now? Taking this opportunity just so I can ask you, why not subscribe? That would be too much, right? No, seriously, if you love Disney Plus and Star Wars, feel welcome, pal. This Saturday, I'll be doing a big ranking of all the 18 Star Wars movies and shows, including the Book of Boba Fett, so if you like that stuff, be sure to stay notified. I'll be coming back to you this Saturday. Okay, well, what I try to accomplish here is balancing my feelings about this show that's on the one hand a welcome slow burn for Boba Fett, and on the other hand a shameless crossover party. A very well-made crossover party, but pretty misplaced in my opinion. As one cohesive show, I think Book of Boba Fett is pretty bad. But how I loved the ride, man. My bottom pick is Episode 1, Stranger in a Strange Land. A decent, slightly uninteresting welcome return to the Star Wars universe. I had no idea the creators were gonna do flashbacks at first, but when I saw it happening, I thought, well, that makes sense. I just hope the writers would have found a way to get us a little more excited with these flashbacks in the first episode as the hook, Boba getting found in the desert, enslaved and beaten down is something we needed to see to make his development make sense, but I feel like it only started to get interesting at the very end of the episode when he gets respected by the chief of the tribe after killing that beast. Before it was just kinda boring a bit. The present timeline stuff is also just fine. It's all fine, but in hindsight, just the least exciting episode. The pacing of the episode was also something to get used to, We had a flashback, a small bit of present timeline, and then another long flashback. Maybe not as engaging as it could have been. Next up is Episode 5, Return of the Mandalorian.
As if millions of voices suddenly cried out in terror and were suddenly silenced.
Look, it's one of the best directed episodes. It's one of the most exciting episodes ever in terms of character development for Din Djarin. He struggles with the weight of the Darksaber, literally and figuratively. He gets kicked out of the tribe because of treason. He gets a new mission objective to purify his sins. He gets a whole new ship. He has a run-in with the New Republic and decides to hold back information. Oh, and I almost forgot. We find out he's visiting Grogu to give him Beskar armor. That's pretty damn huge for an episode that is not in his show. The highs are high in this one. If I ever feel like rewatching The Mandalorian, I'm gonna rewatch this episode next to it. If I ever feel like rewatching the Book of Boba Fett, I'm certainly gonna skip this one. This is completely filler within Boba Fett's narrative and its own season, and I genuinely felt frustrated discovering this on my first watch. Not everyone was, that's fine, but I was invested in Boba's story. So this episode that is obviously robbed from The Mandalorian Season 3, we don't know it for a fact, but come on, is a really enjoyable, well-made, unwelcome addition to the show in my opinion. It hurts so much to rank it here, but I have to balance the enjoyability with its contribution to the show, which is none. This episode doesn't help the Book of Boba Fett. Coming into the top 5, we have Episode 3, The Streets of Mozespa. This episode has problems. The way Boba got rid of Chrysanthemum after he attacked him felt really underwhelming. Like, just go, just walk away. The Vespa bikes don't fit at all in this Tatooine world. I mean, story-wise, we can talk about it, but the aesthetic alone is like you're mixing Lego sets and Playmobil sets. Like, don't do it. And it's just a really bad color grading job. A little dirt and some desaturation would have been a really simple way to improve this. I know it's a small detail, but they stood out to me so much that it's hard not to point out. But oh, I did really enjoy this episode, you know. The Major Domo is my favorite new character. This episode especially made me fall in love with his humorous, nervous, but very formal way of talking, and I always crack up when I see him.
Actually, I may be able to rearrange some of the appointments.
He brings a unique flavor to the show and I can't quite get enough of him. The thing about the biker gang that I liked is, you know, how awesome the chase scene was. Yes, the slowness is something I personally really liked because it's nerve-wracking, like someone on the sidewalk right before you walking just a little bit slower than you, so you can't pass without losing your mind, you know. This is precisely the feeling I had watching this chase scene, and that works. It's goofy, but it fits really well in Star Wars, I think. This episode sets up more tension, more mystery, and the flashbacks have a really important character moment for Boba, with him finding his tribe all killed, you know, the Tuscans, which is of course direct and personal motivation for taking the Pikes down. Really liked the episode as it had a lot of fun and good character moments for Boba. I was quite impressed with this one, even though it definitely has flaws. Then we have episode 2, The Tribes of Tatooine. This is where we're starting to get into the really good to amazing episodes. This episode had it all. I didn't know Chrysanthemum before I saw the Book of Boba Fett, but my mouth was still on the floor seeing his badassery. Great to see 2 well-realized Hutts, even though through most of the show they weren't really a threat after all. But interesting to see him here regardless, and the present timeline absolutely started to build momentum. But the real meat is the flashback segment, where we see a lot of development of Boba and the tribe. Amazing IMAX screen-worthy action right there with the train heist. I was like, how are you guys gonna top this? And well, in terms of action, they don't really do that until the finale, but this was one of the most heart-pumping pieces of action in the show. The whole ceremony after Boba swallows a lizard is very fantasy-driven, interesting for both Boba's character, but even more for Tusken Raider lore. I thought everything about this episode was a huge step up from the first episode, both in the present timeline and in the flashback timeline. The flashbacks also started to become my favorite thing about the show here, whereas after episode 1 I would have said, cut down on the flashbacks and give us more current plot. Breaking into the top 3, episode 4, The Gathering Storm. I love this episode. This episode is slow-paced, but so essential for Boba's character, and I guess I see The Gathering Storm as the most Book of Boba Fett episode of the Book of Boba Fett. This is the episode where I finally started to fall in love with Fennec, where I understood Boba more, and where I realized, hey, the juxtaposition of 2 lost ex-bounty hunters left for dead on the sands of Tatooine really works. It's poetic as Star Wars tends to be. I had loads of fun with the kitchen scene. It's silly, it's great. Boba and Fennec retrieving the ship and then going back to the Sarlacc pit. That was great, man. Still really questionable. Boba wouldn't have remembered that he came out of the sand with his armor on. That was a bit weird. But overall, just the most character-driven episode, and we got a real mafia scene with amazing dialogue within the final scene in the present day, and it sure was brilliant how they teased Mando returning with the music. Music speaks volumes. I just wish the show had proven me wrong, as I immediately started worrying about the consequences of Din Djarin returning and the effect on the show that was gonna have. My number 2 would be episode 6, From the Desert Comes a Stranger.
You what?
I know I placed the other Mandoverse episode near the bottom of the list, I know. To be honest, this episode still has me worried about the handling of these Mandalorian related shows going forward. Half the episode dedicated to Luke and Grogu training, which has no effect on the plot, themes, or whatever in the narrative of Book of Boba Fett, is still something I take issue with. But the highs in this episode are extremely high for Star Wars entertainment standards. The reveal of Cad Bane had me literally shaking and gasping for air. This is something I wanted for so long. Cad Bane, the most badass looking, the most badass sounding, and most relentless bounty hunter we know. Love that he looks older and paler than in the Clone Wars. He looks a bit different, and I love it. The Marshal is now a character I love because of this episode. I felt like his mannerisms and coolness were just dripping off the screen, especially on rewatch. I realized how good and skilled this actor is. Just his eyebrows, the way he stands, everything with his character is so well acted and directed. And the little canon details are so well done in this episode. You know, in my initial reaction, I didn't even realize how poignant and meaningful Ahsoka's line to Luke was. So much like your father. After Luke wondered about, I don't know, if Grogu's heart is in it. I just completely missed the meaning of it on the first watch. On rewatch, it clicked and it became one of my favorite moments. So much like your father. Of course, this describes Luke's attitude towards Grogu. His persistence and constant worry about the turnout of his training is something Ahsoka recognizes Anakin in the days of the Clone Wars, the master student. And then the other side of the coin is Ahsoka recognizing Luke's never-fading belief that somewhere there is still something in Grogu that will get him to that point, kind of reminiscent of his persistence to turn his father back to the light side. This little sentence is both about Ahsoka's time with Anakin and Luke's relationship with his father. This kind of stuff makes it all such peak Star Wars, man. And last thing in defense of this episode, it still had a lot more that has to do with the Pikes, the main conflict, the world of Tatooine if we compare it to the unwanted cousin called Chapter 5. This one has more. That is the Book of Boba Fett. Stakes are raised when we see Cad Bane. Yes, it's still kind of funny that the main character is a cameo in his own show, but I don't take issue with that if the plot or the backbone of the story gets explored. And no, Luke and Grogu are not part of that, I know. But the very last episode, Episode 7 In the Name of Honor, is ultimately my favorite. I see a lot of disappointment around this episode for some people, which is completely fine. But to me, there's not much to complain here. It's exactly what I'm looking for in a finale. Not any more crazy plot twisting cameos that are totally redirecting the show, just a wrap up of big proportions. The action is crazy well made. I felt like I was walking out of the cinema after watching it. The duel between Boba and Cad Bane was unreal and is to me the central and most important scene in the show. The whole Tusken story is wrapped up beautifully with this exchange between them, Bane talking about Boba growing soft, but no, just as we fans are sometimes missing the point, Boba is stronger than he ever was. Notice the change in music. The hum-de-dum theme was only connected to his character in the flashbacks, but the moment he grabs his gaffy stick, the theme comes back, and the new stronger Boba Fett who stands for justice emerges, right? That's how he wins and gets the better of Bane. I guess that's why the showrunners were holding back on making him kick ass in the present. Totally great storytelling. Just a really focused, no-nonsense, giant action sequence of an episode that shows prime Boba. The whole episode, his team tries to win the war with as much civility as they can. I like that dynamic within it, but inevitably, war breaks out. This was where it was building to, and it worked for me. If you want to hear more in-depth thoughts, there's a 40-minute discussion with me and a friend of mine full of details, raw thoughts, and some humor. Be sure to check it out if you have time, so I can keep it short here. I'm thinking about wrapping this up. Thank you so much for watching. I'm curious, how would you rank the episodes? What do you think of the series overall? I think a ranking is extra interesting with this show because it's so weird. Be sure to let me know in the comment section. And if you're interested in my thoughts on all the episodes, you'll find it in the description, or visit the channel. Did you like this video? Then there's a button to express that. Thank you so much. That really helps. For now, have a wonderful day and see ya.